Good morning. Happy Sunday, and welcome to the Fantasy Points Extra Point Show. My name is Nick Skrip. I'm with my guy Major here, going through some player prop bets for Week 15. Season's trucking along. You're now in your fantasy playoffs. We're getting closer to the NFL playoffs. There's a lot to look forward to here. Major, man, how are things? It's good to be back on the show. Good to be back connected. I missed last week, but how are things?
Good to have you back. You missed me kicking your butt. I think you kind of weasel your way out of that. You know what I mean? You
That's why
missed my
that's why I
first.
wasn't here.
You missed my first 4-0 week. Like you missed a lot, man. It was a good week. Going in there, we had Trav on here. He did a great job filling in for you. But everything good, man. You good?
All good. Everything's good. I'm ready for some more action. Had a good game last night. We have a bunch of games that got moved around. I'm just knocking on wood that we just have a smooth schedule heading into the rest of the week here. But a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. So we do have some games now on Monday and Tuesday. Plenty of games to look forward to for today, though. And what Major and I do on a weekly basis, if you have not tuned in before, is we go through some of our partner sites and run through some player prop bets for the weekend. It's a lot of fun. He goes through his picks, I go through mine. If you're listening and you want to play, you can pick what you like and then make your own bets. But it's a ton of fun. So we'll start things off today with Monkey Knife Fight. And Monkey Knife Fight, if you are not familiar, very easy to utilize. And you can go straight to the App Store and type in Monkey Knife Fight, download the app, or you can go to the website, www.monkeyknifefight.com. I was just on the site yesterday. Either way, very easy to use. How it works is you pick a sport. So they have multiple sports, but we'll obviously talk about the NFL today. You select a game matchup, or you can select the early slate of games, and then you pick your fantasy contest. So they have a bunch of different sort of games you can play, more or less rapid fire, stat shootout. There's a fantasy option. There's a sack option. There's a bunch to choose from. And then you choose your buy-in. New users, you can use the promo code Fantasy Points. It's Fantasy PTS to claim an instant 100% deposit matchup up to $100. And if you do sign up today, you also just get a free $5 to use. So a lot of incentives there for Monkey Knife Fight. So Major, we'll start things off with you, man. What's a bet you like today for Monkey Knife Fight?
Yeah, I'm going with the early games, and I went Houston versus the Jags. I went like two of the worst teams in the league just to have a little fun here. Went a little more or less. I have David Mills more than 20. I'm sorry, more than 220 and a half passing yards. Mills beat this mark 4 out of 9 times this year. The Jags defense is giving up 241 and a half passing yards per game. Um, so I think it kind of works out. The math works out right there, and I think it's going to be a wacky game. You have two of the worst teams in the league. You have COVID, people falling all over the place. You have so many different factors. I think this week in general is just going to be uh I think it's gonna be a weird week with everything going on. The second part of that bet, I have Trevor Lawrence more than 210 and a half passing yards. T Laws beat this mark 7 times in his rookie season. Um, Houston defense is giving up 237 yards a game. So I think both of these guys I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be like garbage time heaven. I think these guys is going to throw the ball over the place. Hopefully Trevor, he's a scary one in this one for me, and that's a little weird, because David Mills was not even like on the radar during the draft for most people, and we all know Trevor went number one. So um, I don't know. It feels like David Mills. He's given us like 300-yard games a few times. Trevor Lawrence, he'll give you a good game, and the next game you'll get 100 yards passing. So you never know what's going to happen in Jacksonville. So what do you think about that one?
I like it because I think the game is just set up for both of these guys to be able to be successful through the air. I'm not going to say both guys are going to throw 4 touchdowns in this game, but I think both guys definitely have the opportunity to air it out. And if we look at your guy Mills that you just mentioned a handful of times there, the last 2 full games he played, 331 and 310 passing yards. So
Right.
he's actually been pretty good through the air. And I saw somebody tweet out one time recently that Mills has kind of been just as good for fantasy as Lawrence and Zach Wilson this season. If you look at the numbers, it kind of does make sense. So I do like that. I look at ESPN too; they have him projected to throw 234 yards. So that obviously that would mean your bet is on the money as well. And Trevor Lawrence, you mentioned him too. He's had a bunch of games where he's been, decent with the passing yardage. He's not throwing a lot of touchdowns, but through the air, especially versus the Texans here, I think the opportunity is definitely there. So I'm with it. I think this is your one game that's like a shootout that you wouldn't expect to say it's a shootout. Usually we'd say the Cowboys versus the Chiefs is a shootout, but now we got Jags versus Houston. It only makes sense.
Get it?
All right. My pick, I'm gonna go with the running backs from the Steelers versus Titans game, and I'm using the more or less fantasy option here. So I like Najee Harris in this one. The mark is 69.5 rushing yards. Volume is king for running backs. We know this, and he is a guy that gets a ton of work on the ground. He's had 41 carries in his last 2 games combined. He's had 7 games this season with 20 plus rushing attempts. So the Steelers have struggled as of late, against the run on the flip side of the ball. And we look at Deonta Foreman in this one, who we might not look as like the most elite of options. And I don't want to compare him to some of these other guys, but the Steelers have given up 205 rushing yards to Dalvin Cook. They gave up 55 and 52 yards to Lamar Jackson and Devonta Freeman. And then Joe Mixon, they gave up 165 rushing yards. So they're giving up a ton of yards every single game to the rushers. So because I like Najee Harris's volume so much, for one, and then for two, the Steelers are giving up a ton of yards. I like both Najee Harris to be more or to rush for above 69.5 rushing yards. And I also like Deonta Foreman to rush for more than 54.5 rushing yards. And I feel like for Foreman, he's a little bit of a question mark, but he has been carrying the ball the most for the Titans, and 54.5 could be 3 carries. I mean, if he has one huge one. So that's what I like for my first bet there.
I'm with you. You took the words out of my mouth with that last part you said about Foreman. He is the question mark in this equation because you never know who the Titans are going to go with. They kind of played a hot hand, so hopefully he can you know get it going so he can stay in the game and you can hit that bet. Yeah, man. For my second one here, I chose the Minnesota Vikings versus Chicago Bears. I did a new one. I haven't done this one before. It's called Rush Hour. You choose 2 players to see who's going to get the most rushing yards. And my goal is 199 and a half yards for a 2x prize. And I went with Dalvin Cook and Devin Montgomery, which is just like the obvious choice. I almost went with Justin Fields, but I decided to go with Montgomery. But Cook and Montgomery are both averaging a combined 131 yards a game. Both defenses they're going against combined average of 80 or 185 yards a game, and but both ranked at the bottom half of the league. I know it doesn't really add up to make make my bet come through. I'm kind of like talking against myself here, but Cook is coming off a monster game. He had 205 yards last week, and I think he's going to do most of the heavy lifting in this equation here. And Monty's going to add whatever he can add. So what do you think about that?
So what's that mark again? Because I haven't seen this one either, and I think it's interesting. So they have what do they have to hit again?
199 and a half yards. So I need to get 200 yards.
Oh, I mean, it sometimes we think it's a gimme and it's not, but at the same time, I just mentioned Dalvin Cook 205 rushing yards last game. I think him in this game himself could probably hit very close to that mark. And David Montgomery, before he was injured through the first 4 weeks of the season, he had 2 games above 100 rushing yards out of 4. So he's another guy that can get above 100 rushing yards. And Dalvin Cook's kind of a gimme. It seems like, especially knowing that the Minnesota Vikings are really, really, really trying to push for a playoff position. And what did they do last game? They gave him 27 carries. So I'm with you. I feel like that's a pretty modest mark for 2 guys that we've seen rush for over 100 yards individually a handful of times this season. So I like that. I'll have to check that one out. I've never played that one, but I like how they keep adding different options in there.
Absolutely.
My second one, and I've only really played this like once or twice, but I was gonna test out the fantasy challenge again, and the mark that I have to hit for fantasy points is That's a brand drop right there. Look at that, all creative. 53.5 fantasy points between 3 players. So that's the lowest mark, and I selected that. So I have to pick 3 players from the Falcons. I'm repping the Pitts jersey here. The Falcons versus the 49ers. So the 3 guys that I'm going to pick have to hit that mark. The first guy on my list is George Kittle, who in the last 2 games have 39.6 and 34.1 fantasy points. Across these 2 games, Kittle had 27 targets, 332 total receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. The guy has been going absolutely nuts. People thought he was banged up after the game. He's good. So I like that. He can get close to that mark himself if he continues on this trend. Second guy I like in this game is Patterson, the running back wide receiver combination player on the Falcons, who has been awesome this season. He's very safe because he's only had 2 games under 10 fantasy points this season, but he has a decent ceiling as well. He saw 6 games above 18. So pretty safe floor. We've seen the ceiling before for Patterson, and he gets used a ton. And then the last guy is also a running back wide receiver like hybrid now. Deebo Samuel, the last couple of games, he's carried the ball 8, 6, and 8 times. So he's a running back now in this system. Deebo's also had 4 games with 100 plus receiving yards, as well as 6 games above 20 fantasy points. So the fact that he can run and get the yardage through the air is a big plus. So I like George Kittle, Patterson, and Deebo Samuel to get above 53.5 fantasy points combined.
That sounds a little modest too. Like I think they're gonna hit that plus more. So I think that's a safe bet. Um, Kittle is on fire, dude. That dude is like I am not even checking his stats, but he must be towards the top 3 in fantasy points the last few weeks. The guy's been on a tear. Um, Patterson, that dude is he's a one of those Konami code backs where you can get the passing yards and running yards and all that other stuff. So, and Debo again, another Konami code. He's a running back now. You know what I mean? So
Wild.
it's you made some great choices. I think that's an easy bet, man. I think you got that in the bag, man. I'm
And
thinking
on
it's
a
true, but it sounds good.
And if you do think it's modest, like if you're looking at the same bet and you're like, man, it seems so easy, you can bump it up for more money. So I think there's like a next mark of probably a high 50s for the bet. Deebo Samuel just like quoted, I think, saying the other day that he wants to be the first wide receiver in X amount of years to lead his team in rushing touchdowns. And he's already got a bunch.
It's
It's
crazy.
wild. It's wild. So again, Monkey Knife Fight, go straight to the app, or you can go to monkeyknifefight.com. And if you do sign up today, if you are brand new to it, use that promo code Fantasy Points, Fantasy PTS, to sign up for that deposit matchup up to $100. Definitely worth it. Monkey Knife Fight, very easy to use. So we'll shift things over now to Thrive Fantasy. And this is another player prop app that you can use, a partner of ours here at Fantasy Points. So how this one works is you get a list of 20 players on Thrive, and there are more or less options for various stats. So you'll see quarterbacks, you'll see running backs, you'll see wide receivers, tight ends, everything, and you'll see all different sorts of stats. It's not just some sort of yards. Sometimes it's touchdowns, receptions. It's fun to play because it's a variety of different stats that you can bet on. So out of the 20 players you see, you go through and you click 10 of them, more or less, and then you put your money down for what sort of confidence you have in that bet. So another app that's very easy to utilize, and it's a lot of fun knowing that you can bet on different stats there. If you do want to sign up, again, go to the App Store, just like Monkey Knife Fight. You can go straight to the App Store, type in Thrive Fantasy, or you can go to thrivefantasy.com. This time you can use the promo code Fantasy Points, but it's spelled out. It's Fantasy Points, completely spelled out. Also, 100% instant first deposit matchup up to $100 for signing up. So a good incentive there to play Thrive today. Major, what's your first Thrive Fantasy bet that you have some confidence in today?
I'm going tight and heavy on Thrive today. I know it's not tight end week, but we're gonna do it because I'm looking and I seen Evan Ingram 26 and a half receiving yards. That sounds crazy. Like,
26 and a half for Ingram, huh?
yeah, it's crazy. So I'm going more than 26 and a half. I know 27 yard doesn't sound like much, but looking at his stats, Ingram only hit that mark 6 out of 11 times this season. Last week, Ingram had a dud with 8 yards.
Yeah.
8 yards last week against the Chargers. So But the thing that kind of makes me lean this way is Danny Dimes is out. You have Mike Glennon in, and Abaka's best friend is a tight end. So I
Yes, sir.
we can get this in 2 receptions. So and I think he's going to have a bigger workload than that. So I'm going Evan Ingram more than 26 and a half receiving yards.
And I think, if we look at last game, we saw, definitely a dud of a game, 1 catch for 8 yards, but the entire offense was terrible in that game. The
Right.
Chargers secondary was very good. Their whole defense in general was very good. I was talking about guys like Sterling Shepard and I forgot if it was Tony or Galladay. I think it was Galladay. It was Galladay and Shepard who were kind of geared up for a good day, and both of them were terrible too. So not just Ingram in that one, they were all pretty bad. And like you said, he's hit that mark a bunch of times this season. 20, you said 26 and a half.
20 yeah, 26 and a half. So I need
That's 2 catches. That's two
right.
catches. So you're basically saying betting on him to have 2 catches today. The projection says 3. Looking just at ESPN. But I even think that's pretty modest too, because like you said, I love that point, and I think it's very accurate. And I know it's talked about a lot, but an uncomfortable quarterback in an uncomfortable situation, I mean, he's a veteran, I guess, Glennon, but at the same time, he don't play every day, So I think the tight end is going to be his best friend. So I like that one a lot. My first one for Thrive today, and I was talking about it on a pinned video on my Twitter profile. Talking about some starts this week. I really like Tua this week, quarterback for the Dolphins, and the Thrive pick for him is above 21.5 completions, which against the Jets, you might say, well, what if they don't have to throw the ball enough? But I think it's very modest to say he's going to complete the ball. He's going to complete 22 passes. In his last 3 games, he's completed 27, 27, and 30. What I'm most impressed with right now with Tua is his completion percentage. His last 3 games I just mentioned, 81.8, 87.1, and 73.2 for his completion percentage. He's super efficient. So when a guy is playing efficiently, and when a guy wants to go out there and win a football game, I think those two add up for him to have 22 completions, which again is modest. So in 2 of 7 games played above 50% of the snaps this season, 5 of them have been above 21 completions. So he's done it a bunch of times this season. He's playing really well. I know Waddle is out, but Devontae Parker, who has a good connection with Tua, is in, and he's been missing for a handful of games. So look for Tua to hit that 21.5 completion mark. And I also like guys like Parker and Gesicki to have a good day today. But still, same faith in Tua, or are we thinking different against the Jets here?
No, I'm with you 1000%. And that's a perfect segue to my second pick. I have Mike Gesicki more than 45 and a half
Oh,
receiving yards.
this is not planned. It's
Yeah,
not planned. I like it.
no, we're always in sync, man. That's why you're
Let's
my
go.
guy. But Mike will, again, like you just mentioned, Mike's going to have a larger role in this offense this week due to Waddle being out, being on the COVID list. Gesicki hit this mark 8 times this season. Um, like Pittman and oh wait, this is the wrong thing. But I don't know. You pretty much hit all my things. Tua's playing a lot better. I don't have that much confidence in Parker. Um,
Mhm.
he's a good player, but he's hit or miss. And I think this week is going to be like everyone just like trying to push for the playoffs, playing it safe. You're going to go to your check downs. You're going to go to your tight end. You're going to just keep the game super simple. So, and I think all the lines this week has all been pretty modest. We've said modest a lot. That's the key word
Yeah.
of the show. And I think they know because of COVID hit the league so rampant this week. I think they're helping us out with the betting lines a little bit. So um, 45 and a half yards. Again, that's 2 or 3 receptions for the most part. So I like Mike to get more than 45 and a half receiving yards.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think because of the complexity of the schedule this week, I feel like some of these bets you're like, man, it almost seems like a smash. Like it only makes sense. And I don't know if that's because maybe some people are hesitating betting right now, but I really like that pick, and I love how it goes hand in hand with my Tua completion pick right there. And Gesicki is a guy coming off of a 11 target game. We saw him earlier this season have a 12 target game. He's had a couple where he's had 8 multiple times. So I like that a lot too. I actually think Gesicki might be one of the better plays today for fantasy. and then that relates directly to player props as well. So I'm digging that, man. I like that a lot. My second one, you meant is we're going hand in hand. I like the fact that we don't share sometimes our bets because they always like run into each other and it makes it for a better show. But my second pick is Trevor Lawrence, and even though I did agree with you that he was going to have a good day through the air as far as yardage goes, I'm going to say that he is going to be under 1.5 passing touchdowns. And I know that Urban Meyer is out of the picture. And sometimes when there's a coaching change, the offense plays better because they're playing for I don't know. Some guys like that there was a coaching change and it gives them some confidence. And some guys get the shackles taken off them. Like James Robinson might actually get to play football today. But with Trevor Lawrence, I don't know if we can look at his touchdown stats this season and say it's directly related to Urban Meyer. I know the state of the offense probably was, but since the bye, Trevor Lawrence has only thrown 2 touchdowns, so 2 in 7 total games. This season, I think he's only thrown like 9. He doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns. So I think betting for him to be under 1.5 makes sense because only one time this season has he thrown for more than 1 touchdown. And it was week 1. He gave us a tease. He had 3 touchdowns, and then he never threw 2 after that. So I'm going to go Trevor Lawrence under 1.5 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing here. Um, he's yeah, since week 1, he's only had 6 touchdowns, and there's only 1 per game. So, like you say, he doesn't score that many touchdowns. But do you think it was a Urban Meyer thing, or do you think it's a Trevor Lawrence thing that kind of held him back a little bit?
I think that the state of the offense was just the way that the offense operated probably had a lot to do with Urban Meyer. But I think throwing the ball to people in the end zone is a Lawrence thing, in all honesty. And I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. He probably doesn't have the best offensive line. If we look at his receivers, I know that, from a fantasy perspective, we might say, hey, Marvin Jones is good. And, Laviska Shenault should be better. But like, are they top tier wide receivers right now? Probably not. So I think there's a mix of things in there, but just looking at the stats, I just don't have the confidence in Lawrence to throw 2 touchdowns. But for all I know, he's going to throw 4 today now.
I'm about to say, keep in mind he's playing against Houston, and like
That's true.
I do like some of their young talent on that defense, but they're still in the maturation stage of their career, so they're all pretty young. And I think, like I said in my Monkey Knife fight, Mills and Lawrence, I think this is going to be a garbage time Super Bowl. I think it's going to 2 of the worst teams, and they're looking towards next year already, and they're going to try to get Trevor Lawrence back on track. So maybe he does throw 3 or 4 touchdowns a day just to mess up your bet. But
yeah. Here's a bold call. It was not a bet though. Here's a bold call. I'm going to say James Robinson scores twice today, and the reason being is because this guy has only carried the ball the last 2 games 8 and 6 times, and I know he's been banged up, but Trevor Lawrence has been verbally saying get him on the field, and I think Urban and the running back coach were like, nah. And I think he's going to be due for a big day, but we'll see. Maybe that means Trevor Lawrence throws him 2 touchdowns, but only time will tell here. So I do want to mention Tom Browley has some picks here for Thrive as well. He has Devontae Adams over 88.5 receiving yards, like that one. He has Mike Lennon under 197.5 passing yards, but I think Major's going to get his Evan Ingram bet there. And then he also says Devontae Parker over 54.5 passing or receiving yards here. And I think that's, again, another modest one there, knowing that Waddle is not in the picture. So if you do check out Thrive, again, it's fantasy points completely spelled out. If you go back to Monkey Knife Fight, that promo code is fantasy PTS. Stay tuned on the fantasy points stream today as we have Tom Browley, who I just mentioned, with Joe Dolan, talking about the slate of games as we head into week 15 here. We got fantasy playoff season and just some more NFL games. Major, anything you want to mention before we close things out here today?
Nope, that's it. I'm a little disappointed. I got kicked out the Scott Fish Bowl, man, by 0.89. Like, I just needed one more reception from Cooper Kupp, or I just needed like Trevor Lawrence not to give me negative 13 points. So I'm a little sad this week. Fantasy football, most of my fantasy teams, man, I didn't make too many playoffs this year. I think I'm in too many leagues. I gotta scale it back a little bit and get back to the basics. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a good week for betting. Like again, I said it's gonna be a wacky week. We got a lot of COVID stuff going on. We got a lot of players out. It's gonna be a fun week.
I think so as well. And I'm with you, man. I think I'm in too many leagues this year. I think I'm going to scale it back come next year. I made 10 out of 15 playoffs, 5 and 5 for like buys and not buys. But at the same time, like, there's some leagues I'm rooting for guys that are playing guys in other leagues that I'm starting. So it's one of those, but it's a lot of fun. Crossing our fingers for a good slate of games with no bumps this week. I'm glad that the schedule got set up the way it did. But good luck, guys, in your fantasy matchups, your player prop betting, your home team's game, and enjoy this weekend.